Chapter 10, Planning the Merchandise Assortment, and we're going to break Chapter 10 up into two sections. And so the first section, we're going to look more at choosing your merchandise assortment, and then we'll look at more of the buying section that will look more specifically at the financial side of it and all the figures that you use for that. So first we're going to look at the role of the buyer within your company. And first we're going to look at merchandising. And merchandising is the buying and selling of goods, and it is what separates a retail store with almost any product line from a fashion retail store. Fashion goods require unique merchandising that other product classifications do not. Companies that sell non-fashion items sell staple items that are in demand for extended periods of time and are not subject to rapid change, while fashion goods are available in a wide range of styles and have a brief life expectancy. So, in essence, this is saying the buying and selling of fashion goods is going to actually be a lot more complicated and detailed than the buying would be for staple items, such as a staple item would be, say, Kleenexes, or another staple item even could be Tupperware. Those are all items that have a very long life expectancy and can sit on the shelf longer, and they are just staple items that are needed continually. While your fashion merchandise, you're going to have, especially in women's apparel, you're going to see lots of changes, and you're going to need to change things out per season. So it's actually a lot more difficult to buy because there's a lot more that goes into the whole process. And as I just mentioned, fashion merchandise tends to be seasonal, and there's only a certain amount that you can carry at one time of apparel merchandise. So unlike with more staple items, or even say within like a toy store, you don't keep stock in the back. You only keep as much as you need on hand. And also with fashion merchandise, you tend to go to a regional market to purchase your merchandise. And also, fashion merchandise tends to have a diverse product life cycle. And what that means is, unlike staple goods, the life cycle for an item in apparel can be very short, especially if it's a very trendy, it may not last very long. Unlike a white t-shirt, it's going to have a very long product life cycle. White t-shirts have been around forever. So looking at your merchandise assortment, the merchandise assortment chosen by the buyer is vital to the fashion retail business's success. And buying is one of the most significant jobs within the company. And it's either done by the entrepreneur or a buyer for the company, or a resident buying office who represents the retailer. And buyers are the individuals who determine the merchandise needs of the department or the entire store and make purchases. And they must project sales and inventory levels by month per department or line and determine how much needs to be spent on inventory. So to be a buyer, you actually have to be really good at numbers. You also have to realize and understand your customer and what they want. But you also really need to understand your numbers and do research on your numbers to figure out what sold from last year and what will sell this year. The buyer is also responsible for finding the right merchandise for the target customers while staying within budget. And the whole budget thing kind of plays into the numbers, because you have to see how much you sold last year, at what price you sold things, what the cost of the items were, what the markup was, to try to get that same markup or even a higher markup this time. And this, to be able to stay within budget, this means you need to determine what goods are needed. Then you need to calculate the size of purchases. You need to decide which vendors' goods should be bought. You also need to determine when merchandise should be delivered, and you need to negotiate the price and the terms of the sale. The buyer is also responsible for the purchase and the price of the merchandise, and they determine the price based on the competition level. Price is also based on the speed of inventory level turnover. So remember, if you have real high turnover of an item, you usually have a lower price on it. And also, we talked about competition before. If you have a whole lot of competition, you're going to have a lower price. And also, the price is also affected by the perishability of the product. So if it doesn't last very long, or it has a very short product life cycle, you're going to need to sell it quickly. And also, the value of the item affects the price. Remember, higher value, the higher the price you can charge. The buyers also many times is in charge of assigning the floor space to the items or the lines that they buy. And this is because they know the markup on the items and how quickly they need to sell, so they know where to put these items on the floor. They also select items for visual presentation and promotion. So they determine what items to promote and how low to mark them down for promotions and still make a profit. Also, the buyers should know what items to feature because they're watching trends and they see trends at market and which products will generate customer traffic. And the buyer also manages and collaborates with other departments such as sales, receiving, accounts payable, advertising, and promotion. Now we're going to look at what a resident buying office is, or a consulting office. And some entrepreneurs, they employ a resident buying office to gain support and assistance in buying and promotions. And the resident buying office is usually also called a consulting group, and they offer suggestions for merchandise suppliers that the buyer should use, and they can assist the entrepreneur or the buyer by providing a significant number of services. And they usually do not purchase your merchandise for you unless you have given the company authorization to do so. So the main services that they provide is they keep the retailer aware of new vendors that come into the market. They also provide and tell the entrepreneur about fashion trends that are selling. They also provide them with reduced prices on merchandise. If they find out that a certain line is discounted, they can tell you about that. They're also do trend and color services, so they tell you the new trends and the new colors for the season. They also give fabric trends, and they also give fashion merchandising trends and marketing conditions, or some other things. So they do a lot of research and can provide you a lot of research. And in the U.S., most consulting offices are independent, and they're located near wholesale markets such as New York, Dallas, Los Angeles, Chicago, and Atlanta. And they're critically important in the area of private label merchandise and helping the development of private label brands because they provide large companies. In fact, the company that's mentioned, which is the Doniger Group, which is one of the premier retailing consulting offices in the United States, that's actually who we used in product development for our trend and color and fabric services. And what they do is they come for each season and they tell you, here's the trends that we've seen from our people that have been out researching. They tell you the colors for the season, and also can help you with the new fabrics that are popular for the season. And with smaller companies, they can also help smaller companies they actually develop the private label for you. And then you and other people around the country that are small retailers buy together into a private label, but then you get to put your own brand on, or your own brand or label on it. And so you'll have a private label that no one else in your geographic area will have. And if you want to read a little more about the Doniger Group, if you look at box 10.1 and 10.2, it gives you some more information about the Doniger Group. Now we're going to look at some internal and external sources that are used in the buying and the merchandise process. And buyers need to identify their customer wants and needs by looking at brand preferences, price ranges, sizing, and colors. And some internal sources that buyers use to help them to determine what to buy are they look at past records. So these are often computer reports, and they show the merchandise performance by vendor. They show markdowns, returns, delivery performance, and profit margins. You can also look at the styles, colors, prices, and sizes that sold well for each vendor and which ones did not. Some other internal sources are to use customer surveys or questionnaires. And this is just where you ask questions of your customers on their preferences or their potential preferences, and just kind of learn about those. And these, you can also use observations of shoppers. So this would just be by watching the buying habits of your customers. And a lot of times you can learn this through your sales personnel, because they're usually the ones that observe the customer on a regular basis. And you can also do this by observing your competitors and your customers' competitors. So if you're just starting your store, one thing you can do is go to retailers similar to you or your competitors and watch what people are buying in the store. You can also look at your competitors' assortment. What are they carrying? You can also see what lines they're featuring in their windows and look at what vendors they're using. And then you also want to go to the back and look at their clearance and see what's marked down, what styles are marked down and what vendors are marked down, to kind of help you decide, okay, maybe I shouldn't use this vendor or I shouldn't choose this style because obviously it didn't do well with my competition. And some external sources that the buyer can use to help make decisions on what to buy are resident buying offices, fashion forecasters, trade publications, and reporting services on the web and print. And these sources may be used to locate new vendors, compare merchandise performance, and identify fashion and consumer trends. And the picture of the slide is of the Worth Global Style Network, which is a fashion forecaster and reporting service. And the Donecker Group also does the same thing. Looking at Market Week is the traditional purchase periods when buyers begin to make selections for the next season. And during Market Week, buyers go to regional apparel marts to review new lines. And the number of market weeks varies according to the merchandise classifications, but major apparel markets take place 5 to 6 times per year. However, with a small boutique, you may only go twice a year and do a spring-summer together and then a fall-winter together. And the apparel mart allows the buyer to review a significant number of lines in a fairly short period of time, so you can comparison shop before you place your orders, and you can locate new lines and new vendors. And key vendors are lines that the buyer purchases in depth to sell to the consumer because they provide a broad selection and number of units, and customers will identify with these brands. And selecting vendors can be a tricky process, especially because there's a limitless availabilities when you go to market. So a vendor analysis can be used to determine what items are best for your customers by looking at previous sales, markdowns, and returns. And some other criteria that can affect what vendors you choose could be their minimum order requirements. So some vendors, they'll force you to order, say, a minimum of $1,000 worth, or they could say you have to order 20 units, or they could say you have to order 6 pieces of a style and then you have to purchase 6 styles. So these are just some different examples of minimum order requirements, and starting out you may not be able to do the minimum order requirements of some vendors. So you wouldn't be able to use those vendors in the beginning. Or if a vendor, it's kind of tricky if you've never used a vendor to know how well they're going to do. If you have to buy a whole lot in the beginning, you may not want to, take that risk. Next are distribution practices, and this just looks at whether the vendor or manufacturer ships on time, and if they allow your competitor to also buy the same line as you. Those are things that you want to look at, because if they have issues with when the items are going to be shipped, or they can't get them to you on the time that you're needing, then that's probably not a good vendor for you. You also want to look at exclusivity. So you want to purchase from vendors who will limit who can carry the merchandise in a geographic area, or the competition has to pick a different style within a line of that company, so they won't have the same line as you. So if they provide exclusivity, that would be a vendor that you want to look for. You also want to look at the manufacturer's promotional policies. So this is when they have sales. So they can have off-price and closeout merchandise. And these are goods that can be purchased from the manufacturer for below wholesale price. And closeout merchandise has been overproduced or it's been returned by retailers because of the lack of sales or late shipment. And they're usually available in the middle of the selling season. And they're a great way to bring in fresh merchandise that has a higher profit potential because of the lower cost of goods that you've had to pay for it. Also, some manufacturers will give you advertising allowances or will do cooperative advertising. Advertising allowances is just funding provided to you for advertisement, for featuring their products in an advertisement. So, for example, if you're going to work with a company, say, named Amy Buyer, they would say, I'm going to give you $500 towards whatever advertising you want to do as long as you use, this specific ad that I'm giving you that has the clothing that you are going to carry in your store. And co-op advertising is when the manufacturer just says, okay, tell me what advertising you're going to do and I'll pay for half of that. And if you look at box 10.3 of the book, it shows an example of a co-op advertising contract. Another factor to look at when choosing a vendor would be their shipping practices. And you need to make sure that you pick vendors that can ship current and future orders on time and as specified on their purchase order. So that's a big deal. You need to find someone that's reliable, that's going to get things to you on time and ship you specifically what you ordered and not something random that they just had lying around. Next is under shipping practices is lead time. And that's the amount of time it will take for the order to get to you once it's placed. So the shorter the lead time, the better. And this, by having a shorter lead time, you can order in smaller amounts and then you'll have time to reorder if you start to sell out. And most retailers don't want to have back stock that they keep in the back. So that's why you want really short lead times. So for example, if the lead time was say 2 weeks, then you could only order say 15 units or 10 units. And then you could see how they sell. And then once they start to sell, when you get half sold, you could go ahead and reorder 10 more because it would only take 2 weeks for it to get there. So say the lead time is 3 months, that's probably not a good lead time. So you're really going to want to buy, if you're going to buy from them, you're going to want to buy a large amount if it's a company you really like with such a long lead time because you're not going to be able to reorder for them probably in time. Also, you want to look at their cancellation dates, and this is the last day that a vendor can ship merchandise, and that is specified on the purchase order. So you want their cancellation date to be really close to when you need the merchandise because you don't want them to be shipping your merchandise late into the season because then you've lost part of your selling season and part of your profits. Another thing to look at is adherence to the purchase order specifications. And this just looks at choosing a vendor who will ship you what you order and by the date you ordered. So you don't, as I've kind of talked about before, you don't want to work with vendors that send you other items or items after the specified date because they are lost selling days. And also you want to find a vendor that will cooperate with you. You want a vendor that's going to tell you what styles are selling well or being ordered by other people. You also want a vendor that can provide promotional assistance in the form of fixtures or display materials or in-store signage, or that does educational seminars for your sales associates. And also you want to look for vendors that have incentives for your sales associates if they sell well. Now looking at purchasing in the marketplace. Seasoned buyers rarely commit to ordering merchandise the first time they view manufacturer's lines. So usually what a buyer will do is they're going to take notes on the merchandise that is available at each showroom when they're at market. And then they're going to evaluate each item in terms of what they saw from all vendors. And then they'll make choices. So once buyers have examined everything that's available, they can choose those styles that are best suited to their company. And after the buyer has calculated their open to buy expenditures for each department, they will write purchase orders on their company's order forms. And an example of an order form is on page 222, and it's figure 10.4. And you can also purchase items by having the vendor come to you. Big retailers such as JCPenney's, they don't go to market, but they actually have vendors come to them, to their showroom, to show them their lines. Also, many vendors offer websites or catalogs where you can view merchandise to purchase. So, say if you go, so if you go to the Dallas Market Center website, which is pictured above, you can look for specific vendors and then try to find their product lines on their website to view. And this will be great for this when you go pick some of your lines. You can go look on this website to help you pick your lines. And regardless of where you choose your merchandise, it's important to remember to choose merchandise that the customer wants. So we've kind of repeated that over and over. The most important thing is to choose the merchandise that your customer will want and will identify with. And we kind of mentioned before that merchandise, there's some different fashion seasons, and that's why fashion merchandise needs to be bought different from more staple items. And vendors introduce new styles for each season for the buyer to preview and purchase. And most manufacturers will develop 5 seasonal lines. And as I kind of mentioned, some retailers only have 2 seasons if they don't have a high level of seasonal change. And this is usually like in home accessories or active sportswear. You'll just have a fall-winter season and a spring-summer season that you put together. So the main 5 seasons that you have are fall 1 and fall 2. You have winter and holiday, and you have spring and summer. And those are the main 5. But high-end vendors will actually add a sixth season, which is resort. And this is for customers between winter and spring when they're usually traveling. Now we're going to look at the 6-month plan. And one of the first steps that the buyer must undertake is planning the dollar purchases. And most retailers use a 6-month merchandise plan, like the example shown in the slide. And this is shown in figure 10.6 of your book. And the categories of the 6-month plan are planned sales, beginning of the month and end of the month inventory levels, markdowns, average inventory, and stock turn. And the 6-month merchandise plan also incorporates the sales forecast, which is the estimate of future sales volume for a specific merchandise classification. And sales forecasting is based on a 4-to-5 calendar, and that's what's shown in the slide. And how a 4-5-4 calendar works is you start with 4 weeks in a month, and then you go to 5 weeks in the next month. And you keep this consistent, so you compare last year's sales to this year's sales for the same day of the week by balancing the dates and the month. So you want to look at the Saturday of last year against the Saturday of this year. You can do it if you'll use a 4-5-4 calendar. And the accuracy of your sales forecast depends on several factors. It depends on the stability of the market, the experience of the buyer, the type of business the forecast is prepared for, and the age of the business. And all of these things will affect how well sales can be predicted. In your sales forecasting, your buyers need to estimate your sales potential for a particular segment of the market, and then they need to estimate the share of that total that the company can hope to capture. So you need to figure out, okay, here's my market. Of this market, say of consumers 18 to 24, I know that, it makes up this many people. So now I need to estimate of this group, how much of this market do I plan to try to capture? And that kind of determines how much you need to buy and how much you need to have on hand. And when you're forecasting sales for a new business, the entrepreneur will need to look at informed estimates, and they'll found these through research and historical or estimated data. So the first time around, it's going to be a little tricky sales forecasting because you have no past sales to go on. Now we're going to look at planning the merchandise assortment. And merchandise assortment is a range of styles, colors, sizes, prices, and types of products offered to satisfy the customer's needs. and they allow the retail operation to meet planned sales goals and provide an adequate amount of merchandise to support these goals. So an example of an assortment merchandise plan form is figure 10.8 of your textbook. And merchandise assortments are composed of merchandise classifications and categories. And merchandise classifications or categories are groups of similar products such as dresses, skirts, or jeans that are found in an area or department of a retail store. Merchandise subclassifications indicate the styles within a classification. So, for example, for Mrs. Sportswear, the subclassifications would be sweaters, shirts, pants, skirts, jackets, and related separates. And for each subclassification, the buyer will determine a detailed breakdown based on price, color, size, and style. And styles are the specific looks within the subclassifications. So, for example, in our sportswear that we just mentioned, we said that skirts would be one of our subclassifications. So, skirts could include pleated skirts, pencil skirts, full skirts, mini skirts, or long skirts. So if you look at the slide, it shows Urban Outfitters, and that would show some of the styles within their skirt subclassification. And the buyer will need to determine how much to buy of each subclassification. And these decisions are made based on past sales and markdowns, if they are available, and the buyer's perception of consumers' taste. And this ends the first part of Chapter 10.